What happens when a species that invented compound interest meets a galaxy that's been trading in straight bartering for 10,000 years? Marcus Chun thought he was just fixing hyperdrive engines on a backwater space station. He had no idea that his casual comment about building credit would accidentally solve the greatest economic mystery in galactic history, or that it would make him the most wanted human in three-star systems. The Galactic Trade Consortium had ruled commerce across 847 worlds for millennia, but their system was crumbling. Goods moved slower than they should. Innovation had stagnated. Entire civilizations were trapped in cycles of immediate exchange that prevented any real growth. The greatest minds of 100 species had studied the problem for centuries without finding an answer. Then a grease-stained mechanic from Earth mentioned something about paying it forward and interest rates, and suddenly the economic foundations of an entire galaxy began to shift. Some called it revolutionary. Others called it dangerous. The consortium called it impossible. But Marcus Chun was about to prove that sometimes the most powerful innovations come from the most unexpected places, and that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy might not be their technology, but their understanding of trust. Marcus Chun wiped his hands on his coveralls and squinted at the Zenthri freighter's engine readings. The hyperdrive core hummed with an irregular pulse that made his teeth ache, and the quantum manifold was showing stress fractures that shouldn't exist on a ship this new. He'd been fixing starships on Nexus Station for 3 years now, and he still couldn't understand how these aliens managed to keep their vessels running with such backwards maintenance practices. "Your compression cycles are all wrong," he called out to Captain Veltar, a 7-foot-tall Zenthri whose blue-scaled hide glistened under the workshop's harsh lights. "You're running your engines at maximum output constantly. On Earth, we learned centuries ago that you get more life out of equipment if you cycle the power, maintain it regularly, and plan for long-term efficiency." The captain's 4 eyes blinked in what Marcus had learned was confusion among his species. Maximum output provides maximum speed. Speed equals profit. This is the way of trade. Marcus shook his head and grabbed his tablet, pulling up the diagnostic data. "Look at these numbers. Your fuel consumption is 60% higher than optimal. Your component was accelerated by a factor of 3, and your overall operational lifespan is cut in half. Sure, you might complete this run 8 hours faster, but you'll spend 2 weeks in dock replacing burnout systems." 2 weeks in dock is 2 weeks without profit, Veltar replied, his translator rendering the words with mechanical precision. "Better to run fast and replace than run slow and lose opportunities." But that's exactly the problem. Marcus gestured at the engine bay. "You're thinking in terms of immediate returns instead of long-term investment. On Earth, we have this concept called building credit, not just financial credit, but operational credit. You invest time and resources in maintaining your equipment properly, and it pays you back with increased reliability and efficiency over time." The Zenthri captain tilted his massive head, a gesture that Marcus had come to recognize as deep thought. "You speak of paying for things that do not yet exist. This makes no sense." Marcus paused, his wrench halfway to the quantum manifold housing. In 3 years of working with dozens of alien species, he'd heard variations of this conversation countless times. Every race he'd encountered seemed to operate on the same principle: immediate exchange of goods and services with no concept of deferred payment, interest, or investment in future returns. "How do your people fund large projects?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Building a space station, developing new technology, expanding trade routes. Consortium allocates resources based on immediate need and available surplus," Veltar explained. "If project requires more resources than currently available, project waits until resources become available. But what if the project would generate enough value to pay for itself over time? What if spending 1 million credits now would earn back 2 million credits over the next 5 years?" The captain's 4 eyes focused on Marcus with laser intensity. "You speak of magic. Resources exist or they do not exist. Value exists or it does not exist. How can spending what you do not have create what does not exist?" Marcus set down his wrench and leaned against the workbench. This was the moment that would later be remembered as the beginning of the Great Economic Revolution, though he couldn't have known it at the time. He was just a mechanic trying to explain why proper maintenance mattered. "Let me tell you about my friend Jake," he said, settling into what felt like story time. Back on Earth, Jake wanted to start a restaurant. He didn't have enough money to buy equipment, rent a space, and hire staff. So he went to a bank. Bank. Veltar's translator seemed to struggle with the word. A financial institution that lends money to people who need it now, but can pay it back later with a little extra as compensation for the risk. Jake borrowed $200,000 to start his restaurant. The bank trusted that his business plan was solid enough that he'd be able to pay back the loan with interest over 5 years. The Zinthari's breathing had slowed, which Marcus had learned indicated intense concentration. This bank gave Jake resources that did not belong to him. They gave him access to resources that other people had deposited with them, trusting that the bank would manage those resources wisely. Jake used the money to create a successful business that employed 12 people and served thousands of customers. Over 5 years, he paid back $240,000. The bank made a profit, Jake made a profit, his employees made wages, and his customers got good food. Everyone won. But what if Jake's restaurant failed? Then Jake would still owe the money, but the bank would take a loss. That's the risk of lending. But banks are smart about it. They only lend to people and projects they believe will succeed. And they spread their risk across hundreds of loans. So even if some fail, the successful ones make up for the losses. Veltar was quiet for several minutes, his breathing so slow that Marcus wondered if he'd fallen asleep. Finally, the captain spoke. On Zinthar, if one needs resources for a project, one must trade existing resources of equal value. If resources do not exist, project cannot happen. This has always been the way. And how's that working out for your civilization? The question hung in the air like ozone before a thunderstorm. Marcus realized he might have just insulted a customer, but Veltar didn't seem offended. Instead, the alien seemed to be processing something profound. Our greatest works were completed thousands of years ago, the captain said slowly. Our shipyards build the same designs our ancestors built. Our trade routes follow paths established in ancient times. Progress comes slowly when surplus allows for experimentation. While on Earth, Marcus continued, we went from horse-drawn carriages to faster-than-light travel in less than 2 centuries. Not because we were smarter, but because we figured out how to pool our resources and bet on the future. A new voice interrupted their conversation. Interesting theories, human. Both Marcus and Veltar turned to see coordinator Zinthlos approaching, her elongated form moving with the fluid grace characteristic of the Malari. As the Nexus Station's trade coordinator and a mid-level representative of the Galactic Trade Consortium, Zinthlos wielded considerable authority over commercial activities in this sector. Coordinator, Veltar said, offering the respectful bow due to her position. The human speaks of strange economic concepts. Zinthlos' large, dark eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory intensity. So I heard. Tell me, mechanic, do you really believe that imaginary resources can create real value? Marcus felt a familiar mixture of frustration and opportunity. He'd had this conversation with dozens of aliens over the years, but never with someone in Zinthlos' position. They're not imaginary resources. They're future resources backed by present trust and calculated risk. Trust, the coordinator repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar flavor. This is the foundation of your economic theory. One of the foundations, yes. Along with the mathematical certainty that investment in productive capacity generates returns over time. Marcus grabbed his tablet and pulled up a simple spreadsheet. Look, let me show you something basic. Say you have a factory that produces widgets. Widgets, generic manufactured goods. The factory can produce 100 widgets per day with current equipment. Each widget sells for 10 credits. So the factory makes 1,000 credits per day, or 365,000 credits per year. Centlas nadif. Simple mathematics. Now, Say you could upgrade the factory's equipment for 50,000 credits. After the upgrade, it could produce 150 widgets per day. That's 547,500 credits per year. The upgrade pays for itself in about 33 days, and then generates an extra 182,500 credits in profit every year. But where do the 50,000 credits for the upgrade come from? That's where credit comes in. You borrow the 50,000 credits, pay it back over 1 year with interest, say 10%, so 55,000 total. You pay 4,583 credits per month for 12 months. But you're making an extra 15,208 credits per month from the increased production. So your net gain is 10,625 credits per month. The coordinator's breathing had stopped entirely. In the silence, Marcus could hear the station's life support systems humming and the distant chatter of dock workers loading cargo. You are suggesting, Zinthlos said carefully, that one can create value from nothing. No, I'm suggesting that you can unlock existing value by properly organizing resources across time. The value is always there in the increased production capacity. Credit just allows you to access that value before you've generated the resources to pay for it upfront. Veltar stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow across the workshop. Coordinator, my ship's efficiency problems make more sense now. I run engines at maximum because I think only of immediate profit. But if I invested in better maintenance and more efficient operations, my long-term profits would be higher. Exactly. Marcus pointed at the Zinthri captain. You're thinking like an entrepreneur now. Short-term investment for long-term gain. Zinthlos began pacing, her long legs carrying her back and forth across the workshop with mechanical precision. The implications of this concept, if it works, would fundamentally alter the structure of galactic commerce. Why? What's the current system like? Marcus asked. The Galactic Trade Consortium maintains stability through resource allocation based on immediate availability, she explained. Projects are funded only when sufficient surplus exists. Innovation occurs slowly, limited by the accumulation of physical resources. Large ventures require the cooperation of multiple worlds over generations. And that limits growth, Marcus said. If you can only build based on existing surplus, you can never leverage your potential. It's like, imagine if Earth's governments had only been allowed to build roads after they'd collected enough taxes to pay for them in full, upfront. We never would have built interstate highway systems because the benefits of the highways only become apparent after they're completed and start generating economic activity. On Earth, governments borrowed money to build highways? Veltor asked. Absolutely. Same with universities, power grids, space programs, you name it. We invested in infrastructure and education decades before those investments paid off because we understood that some benefits only appear over time. Sintla stop passing. Human, what you describe sounds dangerously close to the economic theories that led to the Consortium Wars 3,000 years ago. Species attempted to claim resources they did not possess, leading to conflicts that nearly destroyed galactic civilization. What kind of conflicts? Worlds would promise future production in exchange for immediate resources, then fail to deliver. Other worlds would claim ownership of resources that existed only in theory. The wars lasted for centuries until the Consortium established the immediate exchange protocol. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. So the galaxy abandoned credit-based economics because they couldn't make it work? Because they made it work too well, Zinthlos corrected. Species became addicted to expansion beyond their means. They borrowed against projected growth that never materialized. Eventually, the entire system collapsed into chaos. But that's not a failure of the concept, Marcus argued. That's a failure of regulation and risk management. On Earth, we've had banking crises and economic bubbles, but we learned to build better safeguards. We developed credit ratings, reserve requirements, insurance systems, oversight boards. The solution wasn't to abandon credit. It was to make credit more stable and predictable. The coordinator and the captain exchanged a long look that Marcus couldn't interpret. Finally, Sintla spoke. Human, You may have just proposed the most dangerous idea in galactic history, or the most revolutionary. Possibly both. Why dangerous? Because if your theories are correct, the current economic structure of our civilization is fundamentally inefficient. And inefficient systems, once exposed, rarely survive long. She turned her dark gaze on him. You may have just declared war on the Galactic Trade Consortium without realizing it. Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls again, a nervous habit he developed during difficult repairs. I was just trying to explain why proper engine maintenance matters. Veltar's four eyes focused on him with something that might have been amusement. Human Marcus, you have given me much to consider. I believe I will try your maintenance protocols on my next run. And I, said Zinflas, will be very interested to see the results. As the two aliens left his workshop, Marcus realized that something significant had just happened, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what. He'd been having these conversations about Earth economics for years without any dramatic results. Why did this one feel different? He wouldn't have to wait long to find out. Within hours, news of the human economic theory would spread throughout Nexus Station. Within days, it would reach the core worlds of the Galactic Trade Consortium. And, within weeks, Marcus Chun, grease-stained mechanic and accidental economic revolutionary, would find himself at the center of the greatest transformation in galactic history. But, for now, he had engines to fix and maintenance schedules to optimize. The revolution could wait until after he finished his shift point 3 weeks after his conversation with Veltar and Zinflas. Marcus was deep in the engine bay of a Coranian heavy hauler when the first sign of trouble arrived. The ship belonged to a trading family that had been running cargo between the Outer Rim and the core worlds for 6 generations, and its engine showed every year of that service. Marcus Chun, a voice called from behind him. He turned to find Administrator Theclon, Nexus Station's highest-ranking official, standing in his workshop doorway. The hegemony official's presence was unusual. Administrators typically didn't visit maintenance bays unless something had gone very wrong. Administrator, Marcus said, setting down his plasma torch. What can I do for you? Walk with me, Theclon replied, his tone carrying an authority that brooked no argument. They made their way through the station's corridors toward the administrative sector, passing merchant stalls and cargo bays busy with the constant flow of interstellar commerce. The administrator remained silent until they reached his office, a spacious chamber overlooking the station's main docking rings. Sit, Theclon commanded, settling behind his desk with a fluid motion characteristic of his species. His large, multifaceted eyes regarded Marcus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Is there a problem with my work permits? Marcus asked. Your work permits are the least of our concerns right now. The administrator activated a holographic display that showed trade statistics from across the sector. Tell me, Mechanic Chun, what do you make of these numbers? Marcus studied the display, noting shipping volumes, cargo values, and transit times spanning the past month. Looks like normal commercial activity to me. Look closer. Focus on vessels that have visited your workshop in recent weeks. Marcus leaned forward, scanning the data more carefully. Gradually, a pattern emerged that made him sit back in surprise. Ships that had received his services were showing significantly improved performance metrics across multiple categories. Captain Veltar's freighter completed his last 3 runs 15% faster than his historical average, Theclon noted. More importantly, his fuel consumption dropped by 22%, and his maintenance downtime decreased by 40%. Well, yes, Marcus said, confused by the administrator's tone. I recommended he implement proper preventive maintenance cycles and power management protocols. It's basic engineering efficiency. Basic to you, perhaps. Revolutionary to the rest of us. The hologram shifted to show additional vessels. The Coranian hauler you worked on last week reported a 30% increase in cargo capacity after you reconfigured their loading systems for optimal weight distribution over time. The Altarian medical transport you serviced has reduced their emergency response time by 18 minutes per call. Marcus felt a growing unease. Those are good things, right? Better efficiency benefits everyone. Under normal circumstances, yes. But These improvements are not occurring in isolation. The display expanded to show sector-wide statistics. Word of your optimization techniques has spread through the merchant networks. Captains are specifically requesting your services. Some are traveling hundreds of light years out of their way to bring their ships to Nexus Station. The hologram showed shipping lane adjustments, with dozens of trade routes converging on the station in patterns that defied traditional commercial logic. Marcus watched cargo flows bend toward Nexus like light around a gravitational well. I still don't see the problem. Administrator Thicklon's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was agitation among his species. The problem is that efficiency improvements of this magnitude are disrupting established trade equilibriums. Routes that have been stable for centuries are being abandoned in favor of paths that maximize time spent at this station. Competing stations are reporting decreased traffic, reduced revenues, and merchant defections. Competition is good for innovation, Marcus replied, echoing economic principles he'd learned in his youth. If other stations want to compete, they should improve their own services. You speak like a human, Thecklon said, and Marcus wasn't sure if that was meant as a compliment or an accusation. Other species do not think in terms of competition and innovation. They think in terms of stability and established order. The Galactic Trade Consortium exists to maintain balance between competing interests, not to encourage rapid change. Maybe the consortium needs to reconsider its priorities. The administrator's compound eyes refracted the light in patterns Marcus couldn't interpret. Mechanic Shun, you have been on this station for 3 years. In that time, have you ever wondered why human economic theories have not been implemented across galactic civilization? I assumed it was because humans were relative newcomers to galactic society. Partially correct, but the primary reason is that human economic models require a level of trust and risk tolerance that most species find uncomfortable. Thecklon manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up historical data. 3 millennia ago, several advanced civilizations attempted to implement credit-based trading systems similar to what you described to Coordinator Zenflos. The hologram showed star maps with trade routes highlighted in different colors, representing various species' commercial networks. As Marcus watched, the routes began to change, growing more complex and interconnected, but also more chaotic. The initial results were promising. The administrator continued. Economic growth increased dramatically. New technologies were developed at unprecedented rates. Entire civilizations advanced by centuries in mere decades. That sounds positive, until the first major defaults began to cascade through the system. The hologram shifted to show the same trade networks collapsing, routes disappearing, entire sectors going dark. When the Zarathi Combine overextended their industrial capacity and failed to meet their debt obligations, it triggered a chain reaction that brought down 12-star systems and caused the extinction of 4 lesser species. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Extinction. Economic collapse led to resource wars, which led to planetary bombardments, which led to ecological devastation. The Galactic Trade Consortium was founded in the aftermath of these conflicts with a single mandate: never again allow economic instability to threaten galactic civilization. The historical display faded, replaced by current trade statistics. Marcus could see the early signs of the disruption he was causing: traditional routes shifting, established patterns changing, the first tremors of what could become a massive transformation. So what are you saying? That I should stop helping people optimize their operations? I am saying that you may have inadvertently triggered the very instability the consortium was created to prevent. Administrator Thecklon leaned forward, his voice taking on an urgent tone. 3 days ago, I received a communication from Core Command. Consortium analysts have been tracking the efficiency improvements in this sector, and they are concerned. Concerned enough to do what? Concerned enough to dispatch Investigator Prime Kelthane to evaluate whether Nexus Station poses a threat to galactic economic stability. The name meant nothing to Marcus, but the administrator's reaction suggested it should. Who is Investigator Prime Kelthane? one of the consortium's most senior enforcement officials. When the investigator prime becomes involved in economic matters, stations sometimes find their trade licenses revoked. Merchants sometimes find themselves banned from core world markets. Individuals sometimes find themselves relocated to remote research facilities for extended periods. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. When is this investigator arriving? His ship entered the system an hour ago. He will be here within the day. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of unintended consequences settling between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. "What do you recommend I do?" "That depends," Theclon replied, "on whether you believe your economic theories are worth risking galactic stability." Before Marcus could answer, his communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Captain Veltar, and the message was brief but urgent. "Human Marcus, your theories work. Profits increased 40% last month. Word spreading fast. Meet me at Docking Bay 7. Important news." As Marcus read the message, he realized that the question was no longer whether his ideas were worth a risk. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for change, and whether change was coming whether the galaxy was ready or not. "Administrator," he said, standing to leave, "I think we're about to find out if 3,000 years of economic conservatism can withstand one stubborn human mechanic." Theclon's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Mechanic Shun, I sincerely hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Marcus replied as he headed for the door. "So do I." The walk to Docking Bay 7 took him through the heart of Nexus Station's commercial district, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus really looked at what surrounded him. Merchant stalls displayed goods from across the galaxy, but the variety seemed limited compared to what he remembered from Earth's markets. Innovation appeared to move slowly, with many vendors selling the same products their families had sold for generations. He passed a group of young Altarian traders discussing shipping schedules in hushed tones. Their conversations stopped when they noticed him, replaced by respectful nods and what might have been hope in their large, luminous eyes. Word of his work was spreading faster than he'd realized. Docking Bay 7 was busy with the controlled chaos of cargo operations. Captain Veltar's freighter sat in the center of the bay, its hull gleaming with fresh maintenance. The ship looked different somehow, more purposeful, more alive. Crew members moved with an efficiency that Marcus hadn't seen during his previous visit. "Human Marcus," Veltar's booming voice carried across the bay. The massive Zenthari captain approached with what Marcus had learned to recognize as excitement. "Your maintenance protocols have transformed my operations. But that is not why I called you here. What's happening?" "News of your economic theories has reached the Merchant Assembly on Zenther Prime. They wish to speak with you." Marcus felt another flutter of unease. The Merchant Assembly, the governing body of Zenthari commercial interests. They control trade for 17 systems and influence commerce across 40 more. Veltar's 4 eyes gleamed with an intensity that made Marcus step backward. "They are considering implementing your credit-based trading concepts on an experimental basis. That's a much larger scale than I was thinking about. But consider the possibilities." The captain gestured toward the busy cargo bay. "If entire systems could invest in productive capacity before accumulating the resources, if civilizations could build infrastructure based on future returns rather than present surplus, the growth potential is beyond calculation." Marcus thought about Administrator Theclon's warnings, about the historical precedents, about Investigator Prime Kelthane already en route to the station. "Captain, have you considered that rapid economic change might be dangerous?" "All progress involves risk," Veltar replied. "But the greater risk may be in standing still while others advance. The hegemony, the Altarian collective, even the Malari Syndicate, word is spreading. If the Zenthari do not act quickly, we may find ourselves disadvantaged." The competitive implications hit Marcus like a meteor impact. If one species or political entity gains significant economic advantages from implementing human-style financial systems, while others maintain traditional methods, the resulting imbalance could be far more destabilizing than a coordinated transformation. "This is getting complicated," he muttered. "Indeed it is." A new voice joined the conversation, smooth and measured. Marcus turned to see Coordinator Zinthlos approaching, her expression unreadable. "Coordinator," Veltar said with a formal bow, "I did not expect to see you here." "I make it my business to monitor significant developments in my sector," she replied. "And human Marcus's theories certainly qualify as significant developments." "Have you heard about Investigator Prime Kelthane?" Marcus asked. "I'm the one who requested his involvement," Zinthlos said calmly. Both Marcus and Veltar stared at her in surprise. The captain's massive frame tensed, and Marcus felt a sudden urge to check the location of the nearest exit. "You reported us to the consortium?" Veltar demanded. "I reported a potential opportunity," Zinthlos corrected. "The Investigator Prime is not coming here to shut down your activities. He is coming to evaluate whether they can be safely scaled to galactic civilization." Marcus felt the deck of the station shift beneath his feet, not literally, but with the weight of implications he was only beginning to understand. Scaled to galactic civilization? "The consortium is not as hidebound as many believe," the coordinator explained. "They're conservative by necessity, but they're not opposed to beneficial change when properly managed. If your economic theories can be implemented without triggering the instabilities of the past, they represent the greatest opportunity for civilizational advancement in 3 millennia. And if they can't be safely implemented?" Zinthlos' dark eyes fixed on him with predatory focus. "Then they represent the greatest threat to galactic stability in 3 millennia and will need to be contained." The three of them stood in silence, surrounded by the sounds of interstellar commerce that might soon be transformed beyond recognition. Marcus realized that his simple desire to fix starship engines efficiently had somehow evolved into a test case for the future of galactic civilization. Tomorrow, Investigator Prime Kelthane would arrive to determine whether humanity's gift to the galaxy was revolutionary progress or dangerous chaos. And Marcus Chun, grease-stained mechanic and accidental economist, would find himself at the center of that determination. The revolution had already begun. The only question now was whether it would build or destroy the foundations of galactic society. Investigator Prime Kelthane's ship materialized in Nexus Station space with a kind of dramatic flair that only consortium enforcement vessels seemed to manage. The sleek, angular craft bore no obvious weapons, but its dark hull seemed to absorb light in ways that made Marcus's eyes water when he tried to focus on its details. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows, he watched the vessel dock with mechanical precision that spoke of advanced automation systems. "Impressive," Captain Veltar rumbled beside him. The Zinthri had insisted on being present when the investigator arrived, despite Marcus's concerns about making the situation appear more conspiratorial than it already was. "Intimidating is more accurate," Coordinator Zinthlos observed from behind them. She had been unusually quiet since the ship's arrival, her normally fluid movements replaced by rigid formality. Administrator Theclon's mandibles clicked nervously as he monitored the docking procedures from his portable command unit. "All department heads are to remain available for immediate consultation. No one leaves the station without clearance. These protocols will remain in effect until the investigator's evaluation is complete." Marcus tried to calm his racing thoughts. In the 36 hours since learning of Kelthane's impending arrival, he'd attempted to prepare for every possible scenario. He'd compiled technical reports on his efficiency improvements, gathered testimonials from satisfied customers, and even drafted a basic outline of how Earth-style financial institutions might be adapted for galactic civilization. None of it felt adequate. "Remember," Zinthlos had advised him during the preparation sessions, "the Investigator Prime will be evaluating not just your theories, but your capacity to understand their implications. Intellectual curiosity is valued. Reckless enthusiasm is not." The docking sequence completed with a soft chime from the station's communication system. "Investigator Prime Kelthane has arrived aboard Nexus Station," the automated announcement declared. All personnel are to extend full cooperation to consortium enforcement activities. Well, Marcus said, wiping his palms on his coveralls, I guess this is it. They made their way to the main administrative conference room, a circular chamber designed to accommodate multiple species seating requirements. Marcus had never been in the room before. His interactions with station authority usually took place in maintenance bays or service corridors. The door opened with a whisper of pressurized air, and Investigator Prime Kelthane entered. Marcus's first impression was of someone who had been designed rather than evolved. The investigator stood approximately 7 feet tall, with a humanoid form that seemed too perfectly proportioned to be natural. His skin had a metallic sheen that shifted between silver and gold, depending on the angle of view, and his eyes were featureless black spheres that somehow conveyed intense intelligence. "Good day," Kelthane said, his voice carrying a harmonic quality that suggested artificial enhancement. "I am Investigator Prime Kelthane of the Galactic Trade Consortium. I understand there have been some interesting economic developments in this sector." Administrator Theclon performed the formal greeting appropriate to consortium officials, followed by Zinthlos and Veltar. Marcus, uncertain of the protocol, settled for a respectful nod. "You must be Marcus Chun," the investigator said, those featureless eyes somehow focusing on him with laser intensity. "The human mechanic who has been teaching efficiency optimization to his customers." "Among other things," Marcus replied carefully. "Indeed, among other things." Kelthane gestured toward the conference table. "Shall we discuss these other things?" They took their seats around the circular table, with the investigator positioning himself to maintain visual contact with everyone present. He activated a personal holographic display that immediately began showing data streams Marcus couldn't interpret. In the past month, Kelthane began, without preamble, shipping efficiency in this sector has improved by an average of 18%. Cargo throughput has increased by 12%. Most significantly, merchant satisfaction ratings have reached historical highs. "Those sound like positive developments," Administrator Theclon ventured. "They are extraordinary developments," the investigator corrected. "In 3,000 years of consortium oversight, sector-wide efficiency improvements of this magnitude have been recorded exactly 4 times. 3 of those instances preceded major economic collapses." Marcus felt his stomach sink, but forced himself to speak. "What about the 4th instance?" Kelthane's featureless eyes seemed to bore through him. "The 4th instance led to the technological revolution that gave us faster-than-light travel, quantum communication, and universal life support systems. The benefits were substantial, but the transition period was turbulent." "How turbulent?" Sentlasaskiv. 17 governments fell. 2 species went extinct. The galactic population decreased by approximately 4 billion individuals over a period of 2 centuries. The investigator delivered these statistics with the same tone he might use to discuss cargo manifest discrepancies. However, the long-term benefits to survivors were unprecedented. The conference room fell silent except for the subtle hum of the station's environmental systems. Marcus realized that everyone was looking at him, as if his response would determine the fate of galactic civilization. "Investigator," he said slowly, "I want to be very clear about something. I never intended to destabilize anything. I was just trying to help people maintain their equipment more efficiently." "Intentions are irrelevant," Kelthane replied. "Results are what matter. And the results of your activities suggest that you have inadvertently rediscovered the economic principles that once drove rapid galactic advancement. The same principles that caused massive instability," Theclon pointed out. "Precisely. Which brings us to the central question. Can these principles be implemented safely, or must they be contained to prevent catastrophic consequences?" Kelthane manipulated his holographic display, bringing up what appeared to be a complex simulation model. "I've spent the journey here analyzing the mathematical foundations of human economic theory. The concept of credit-based resource allocation is mathematically sound, but it requires several critical factors to remain stable." Marcus leaned forward, his engineer's mind engaging with the technical challenge. "What kind of factors?" First, accurate risk assessment. Lenders must be able to distinguish between viable and non-viable investments with high precision. Second, distributed risk tolerance. No single institution can hold enough credit exposure to threaten system stability if it fails. Third, regulatory oversight to prevent excessive speculation and maintain confidence in the system. Those all sound manageable, Captain Veltar observed. They are manageable for species with appropriate psychological profiles, Kelthane agreed. However, galactic civilization consists of hundreds of species with vastly different approaches to risk, trust, and long-term planning. The investigator gestured toward the Zenthari captain. Your people, Captain Veltar, have demonstrated excellent adaptability to efficiency optimization. But how would Zenthari culture respond to the possibility of losing resources they had invested in failed ventures? Veltar's four eyes blinked in what Marcus recognized as deep consideration. Our people value honor and strength. Financial failure would be seen as a form of weakness, potentially leading to social ostracism or worse. And that, Kelthane said, is precisely the problem. Species that cannot tolerate financial failure will either avoid the credit system entirely, placing them at a competitive disadvantage, or they will take excessive risks to avoid admitting failure, leading to exactly the kind of cascading collapses that destroyed previous civilizations. So what's the solution? Marcus asked. There are three possibilities, the investigator replied, his metallic features reflecting the holographic display's shifting light. First, we continue current policies and contain your innovations to prevent system-wide disruption. Second, we attempt gradual implementation with extensive safeguards, accepting moderate risk for moderate benefits. Third, we implement comprehensive economic transformation across galactic civilization, accepting high risk for potentially revolutionary benefits. What would you recommend? Sentlasaskiv. For the first time since entering the room, Kelthane's perfectly controlled demeanor showed a hint of uncertainty. That decision exceeds my authority. However, I can provide the consortium leadership with a recommendation based on my evaluation of the key variables. Marcus realized that this was the moment his future would be decided. What variables? The primary variable is you, Marcus Chun. Me, your understanding of the principles involved, your ability to communicate them effectively, and, most importantly, your willingness to take personal responsibility for the consequences of implementation. Kelthane leaned forward, his featureless eyes somehow conveying intense scrutiny. Economic systems succeed or fail based on the competence and integrity of those who design and oversee them. If galactic civilization is to adopt human economic principles, it will need human expertise to guide the transition. The implications hit Marcus like a hyperdrive malfunction. You're saying that implementing these systems would require human involvement? Extensive human involvement. Oversight of financial institutions, training of risk assessment specialists, development of regulatory frameworks, crisis management during the transition period. Kelthane's voice took on an even more serious tone. In essence, humanity would become the economic architects of galactic civilization. Captain Veltar's breathing had accelerated. The political implications would be enormous. Many species already view humans with suspicion due to your rapid advancement and aggressive expansion patterns. Which brings us to the critical question, the investigator said, his attention focusing entirely on Marcus. Are you personally prepared to accept responsibility for transforming the economic foundation of a civilization comprising 847 worlds and approximately 2 trillion individuals? The question hung in the air like a star about to go nova. Marcus looked around the table at the alien faces watching him. Administrator Theclon's compound eyes reflecting nervous energy. Coordinator Zenthlas's predatory features sharp with anticipation. Captain Veltar's massive form radiating barely contained excitement. I'm a mechanic, Marcus said quietly. I fix starship engines and optimize maintenance schedules. I never wanted to transform anyone's civilization. And yet, Kelthane observed, your simple desire to improve efficiency has already begun that transformation. The question is not whether change will occur. It is already occurring. The question is whether it will be guided by wisdom or allowed to proceed chaotically. Marcus thought about his workshop, about the satisfaction of solving complex mechanical problems, about the simple pleasure of helping customers achieve better performance from their equipment. He thought about Jake's restaurant back on Earth, about the bank that had trusted him with a loan, about the economic principles that had allowed human civilization to reach for the stars. He thought about 2 trillion people whose lives might be improved by better economic systems, and about the 4 billion who had died the last time someone got it wrong. If I agreed to this, he said carefully, what would be required of me? Initially, you would work with a team of consortium economists to develop implementation protocols. You would train specialists from multiple species in credit assessment and financial oversight. You would help design safeguards to prevent the catastrophic failures of the past. And if something goes wrong, if people die because of decisions I help make. Kelthane's metallic features remained impassive. Then, you will bear that responsibility, along with the collective leadership of galactic civilization. But if you refuse, and stagnation continues to limit galactic development while other dangers grow in the galaxy's unexplored regions, you will bear the responsibility for that as well. Marcus realized that there was no safe choice, no path that guaranteed he wouldn't be responsible for enormous consequences. The only real choice was whether to act with knowledge and careful planning, or to let events unfold without guidance. I need time to think about this, he said. You have 6 hours, Kelthane replied. My ship departs for Core Command at the end of the current cycle. Your decision must be made before then. As the meeting disbanded, Marcus found himself walking through Nexus Station's corridors in a daze. 6 hours to decide whether to help reshape galactic civilization or watch his ideas spread chaotically without oversight. 6 hours to choose between the comfortable life of a starship mechanic and the terrifying responsibility of economic transformation. He ended up back in his workshop, surrounded by the familiar tools and half-completed repairs that had defined his life for 3 years. But even here, he couldn't escape the weight of the decision before him, because whether he agreed to help or not, the revolution had already begun. The only question was whether it would be guided by careful planning or left to the chaos of uncontrolled change. Outside his workshop window, alien merchants continued their business, unaware that their entire economic system might be about to change forever. And in 6 hours, Marcus Chun would have to decide whether to help guide that change or watch it happen from the sidelines. The grease-stained prophet of galactic economic revolution picked up his wrench and tried to focus on the familiar comfort of mechanical problems. But he could no longer ignore the fact that some problems were too large to solve with tools and maintenance schedules. Some problems required trust, courage, and the willingness to build something better, even if the blueprint was uncertain and the consequences beyond calculation.